The National Football League should create more rules protecting players. This is a picture of Malcolm Floyd, who's a wide receiver on the San Diego Chargers, and he was taken off the field on a stretcher after an illegal helmet hit from D'Amico Ryans on the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a short video which shows examples of helmet hits in the NFL. As you can see throughout the video, players are constantly, like that was, for example, a defenseless receiver, and this running back was tackled with the defenseman's helmet, which is illegal in the NFL. Clearly, some of these hits are pretty ruthless, and these athletes are getting bigger and stronger every year, and these players need to be protected. These are just more examples of what these hits are. Even offensive players like Adrian Peterson of the Minnesota Vikings are making hits with their helmet, which needs to be stopped in the NFL. Otherwise, players will get hurt. Yeah. Some of these hits are ridiculous, and players are getting hurt all the time now. Alright, so this is a list from 2012, all the players that were fined for illegal tackles. As you can see, this list is pretty large, and there are multiple, some names are repeated on the list, meaning that players aren't getting the idea that a fine is going to stop them from making a tackle with their helmet. So clearly something else has to be done. From 2012 to 2013 season, there were 3,700 total injuries in the NFL. About 170 players suffered head injuries or concussions from these injuries. Multiple concussions can lead to a disease called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, better known as CTE. CTE is a disease that symptoms in a person can show dementia, memory loss, aggression, and confusion and depression. Now, as of December 2012, 33 retired NFL players were diagnosed with CTE post-mortem, meaning after they've already been dead. They had their brains examined and were found to have CTE. This is a picture of Junior Seau. Many of you may recognize who he is, but you may not. He was a linebacker in the National Football League for a very long time, and he committed suicide. And after he was pronounced dead and his brain was examined, he was found to have CTE, which showed that he, from getting tackles from playing football his entire life, and his head injuries led to having this disease. So the NFL did try and do some things to save some players from getting injured severely. For example, they implemented Rule 12, which in Article 7 states that no player may leave his feet and launch himself towards another player. Also in Article 7 states that no player may tackle a defenseless player. A defenseless player may be someone who has just thrown a pass and cannot readily defend himself, or any player who is a receiver running across the field, making a play, and doesn't have the ability to defend himself from getting tackled. Article 8 states that no player may tackle any other player with the crown of his helmet, meaning the very top, because due to ability, as you saw in the video, that leads to a lot of injuries. This is the Buffalo Bills Stadium. Now, many of you may believe that turf is better than grass. However, the NFL Injury and Safety Board said that they did a study saying that more injuries occur to the ACL and the MCL while playing on turf opposed to a grass field. So if players also on turf fields have the ability to run faster, it's proven that traction is greater on the turf field rather than grass. Any player can run faster, they will hit harder, and therefore lead to more injuries. There were approximately 577 knee injuries in 2012. Out of these injuries, 32 players tore their ACL or MCL or both. Now, already in week 8 of the 17-week season, 38 players have torn their ACL or their MCL this year. Now, this may be due to the fact that these new Rule 12 has been implemented, and players are, instead of trying to hit with their heads to people up high on other players, they're going for their knees instead of the helmet. Clearly this picture is a little exaggerated, but it brings up the question of whether or not NFL players are using HGH, which is human growth hormone. Human growth hormone is a form of steroids and is making these players bigger, it's making them faster and stronger. Just from 1980, the offensive lineman, the average size was 6'4", 280 pounds. Now, just in today's league, the average size is 6'5", 310. So clearly these players are growing in size even if they may not be getting taller. So they're putting on more mass, they're building muscle faster, and they're just much stronger now than they were. So some new rules that should be implemented in the NFL. No player should be allowed to launch himself towards another player at all, whether it be with his helmet or with his arms or shoulders. Players launching themselves makes himself a more dangerous tackler, and there's no reason to do it. You could just wrap up the player. As I stated before, grass fields are proven to be safer than turf fields, and they should be created in more stadiums instead of having turf. Although turf may be a little easier, there's less maintenance from a day-to-day basis, it actually is about the same maintenance overall. From the time you have turf, you constantly have to water turf just as like you do grass in order to keep it clean. And then grass fields will also allow players to run a little bit slower, and it'll slow the game a little more. The roster size of NFL teams should be increased. As of now, 53 players are allowed on an NFL roster. And if you increase the roster size, it may not allow players to be safer at one certain instance, but overall throughout the course of the season, it'll allow less wear and tear on each player, and will give them each player allow them a chance to rest more throughout the game, and give them a chance so they don't have to take as many hits. A developmental league can be created in the NFL. They had a league called NFL Europe a few years back, and what they did in this league, they implemented new rules. Like, for example, they created a 4-point field goal where after further than 50 yards. Clearly that rule isn't in the NFL today, but it did give them a chance to try out a new rule that they thought could work in the NFL. And if they create a new developmental league now, they can test equipment, they can test their new helmets if they want to make new helmets with more padding, if they want more padding in the jerseys, things like that. And they can make new rules to see what they can do to help save players. Also, suspensions and expulsions should be increased. In college football, if a player makes a tackle with his helmet, and to the ref's consent, he'll be immediately expelled from the game. I believe that this should be created in the NFL because more players will tend to not tackle with their head because they don't want to be thrown out of the game. Also, further suspensions throughout the season should be implemented because if players are going to lose playing time or they won't be able to play later on in the season, then they probably won't tackle as much with their head, so they won't get suspended. Also, constant HGH testing. With players in the NFL today, there is no, some players get caught using steroids, but there's not really big testing in the NFL, like there are in other sports like baseball. But if these players start to get tested, then maybe they'll get a little smaller, and if they won't use HGH, then hopefully they'll be less dangerous on the playing field. Now, winning the Super Bowl, especially in America, makes you like basically a hero. This is basically every player dream to win the Super Bowl, and however, these players are athletes. They're also fathers, their sons, their uncles, cousins, their family members, and we need to protect them, and we need to have a safer environment throughout the sport that they play as athletes, because we don't want them to end up like Eric LeGrand of Rutgers, who was paralyzed on kickoff and will never walk again. Any questions?
Still running? Nobody from that class.
Yes.
Which injuries do you think are the most important to try to fight right now?
Well, clearly concussions, but also ACL and MCL are pretty severe injuries. It can end a player's career. But I think concussions are the most, that we should pay most attention to. Yes?
When they're tackling with their helmet, how does the other player not get injured from it, the one that's tackling?
Sometimes they do, actually. It depends what kind of play it is and how they hit the player, but there are instances where the defensive player makes a tackle with his helmet and ends up hurting himself just as much as the other player.
Don't you think players know the risks they're taking, like when they join the league?
Yeah, I do believe the players understand the risk that they're taking, but I think overall, in the big picture, saving a player's life eventually in their, like, later on in life is more important than how much they, like, what they do in the actual game. Yes.
To be just a little bit of an editorial, I mean, I think most of the players that are doing it know that there's risks, okay, with regard to playing or bulking up to, you know, to make that problem, and it looks obviously like there's a lot, certainly looks like there's a lot of that going on.
Yes.
And then, you know, comes the real ethical question of, you know, whether or not, you know, that's their right, so to speak, to make their determination, which, you know, sort of what Thomas has got, I guess, think driving at, or whether or not, you know, there should be a protected kind of thing about that. You know, we're starting to see it, you know, over various things, wrestlers, various people that always, you know, always were concussion prone, you know, dying young, dying, you know, getting Alzheimer's, getting, you know, ALS, you know, various kinds of neurological kinds of issues. And I think what will happen is there's going to be another big spike in that, to the point where, you know, you're going to have to really make a hard choice. You want to live to be 60 years old or 50 years old, and then most of the rest of whatever else you live is pretty limited, you know, or not. And it will really become down to a major ethical kind of situation, you know, with that, because it's, I mean, the money is fantastic, right? I mean, it's just, you know, I mean, how do you even, you know, I mean, especially the NFL, they just, you know, and they're going to Europe, and they're going, you know, they're going to go all over. I mean, it just, you know, it's a total marketing kind of thing. It'll be on 4 days a week, you know, pretty soon. They'll overshoot it, you know, they might have now, but it's anyway, I'm all done editorializing. Anybody else, any questions? Thank you very much.